Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast, this time featuring the FIAAA Insider. Our guest today is Ernest Robertson, Jr., an old friend. Ernest is the Director of Sports Enrichment and Diversity Admissions at the Palmer Trinity School down in South Florida. Ernest, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. Well, as you know, the life of someone in athletics is always busy, so let's jump right into it. We always like to give our listeners an opportunity to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and how you got involved in athletics.
Thanks, Jake. Again, thank you for having me. My story, I'm sure like a lot of athletes, not a lot different. I grew up in Louisiana, a little small town about 45 minutes outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a little town called Opelousas, Louisiana. We grew up, didn't have a lot, but where I grew up is three things you did to keep young athletes out of trouble. You went to church, you went to school, and of course you played sports. So I grew up playing sports every season. I played football, basketball, and ran track. The only days I ever got off were Thanksgiving and Christmas. I was fortunate to be a really talented athlete. So I had a lot of honors going through high school, all district, all parish, all state. I was a 4-year state finalist in track and 4 events. I high jump 400, 800 meters, anchored the mile relay. So I was very fortunate. Sports kept me out of trouble, and my coaches kept an eye on me. I was selected to play in Louisiana All-Star game in football and basketball. At the time, that was pretty new. I don't think anybody else, I don't know, at least that's what they were telling me. They wrote in the local paper that I was very fortunate to be selected for both. And in Louisiana, the All-Star game is a big deal. They take the best athletes from the north and south of the state, and then they go to LSU and they play. I ended up selecting basketball because I thought I'd have a longer career in football, but I really did love basketball. I was 3-sport MVP at my school. I basically won every award that they had in that particular school. So I was very fortunate. I went on to Southern University. That whole experience was amazing, because when you grow up like we do, learning about college and going to college is interesting. So I was recruited by Southern University to play football. They wanted me to be their starting quarterback. Brought me in and asked me. Coach Washington was the head coach at the time. Brought me in for that. I told him yes. Again, a young guy, just wanted to be able to play, but I had a love for basketball. And so I went to Southern University to play basketball and football, but was more in love with basketball and leaned that way. Instead of working harder on football, which I was better at, I wanted to play basketball. And so got into the program in basketball and got put on a developmental squad because the gentleman in the position I was playing, Bobby Fields, everybody knows him, was a long time, was a pro. And at that time, you were going to go to school for 4 years, so he was not going to leave. But I learned very early on, and sports helped me, what my calling was, and I believe it was coaching. So stayed a couple of years in sports and decided to focus on coaching. And then I met some very interesting people in college. Coach Chapman, Pokey Chapman, who was the head coach at LSU, and then went on. She's now coaching, I think, in the WNBA. Met her and worked with them a little bit and got involved in basketball, and then been in love with coaching and teaching ever since then.
What a great experience that must have been growing up. Well, you wrapped up your college career, your playing career, you're gotten into coaching. What were some of your early jobs and what brought you to Palmer Trinity?
Well, anything that would allow me to coach. It was such a passion for me, and I felt so fulfilled to be able to do it. When you have these goals and ambitions and things work out. So I started coaching local teams like AAU teams and travel. And what happened was, at that time through college, we had to do a lot of volunteer work as athletes. And one of the organizations I worked with was the YMCA. And so that's when I first started working with kids, underprivileged kids in small communities, got involved with their athletic programs. So every Saturday I was officiating games or working with kids. And then maybe this was around my junior year, after the first 2 years of trying to make sports work and see if it was going to be something I could earn a living at as a player. Then the last 2 years working on graduating and focusing on coaching. So then I got involved with the YMCA to the point that they really enjoyed what I did, and they offered me a full-time job. So my first athletic director's position was actually in the YMCA. I was a director of athletics for their Barranco Clock branch of the YMCA in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so I ran all of their sports. And that's where it started. So I stayed there a couple of seasons. And what really got me involved in the schools is a lot of the work I did in the YMCA when there were schools who didn't have physical education programs, because most of the schools I worked in initially were high-risk schools. So they didn't have physical education programs. As you know, when schools start to cut budgets, the very first thing they cut are physical education and usually music. So they would cut those programs. So I went in and started a program that would offer physical education to these underprivileged schools in our YMCA facilities, because we had a gym and we had summer camp and we had field space. So that's where I got involved in physical education. So I did that at Barranco Clock for a number of years. And then, as always, they had some budget issues there. And since I was the last guy in, was the first guy to go. But I was young. And so, matter of fact, the severance for that was more better than it was lucrative than any money I earned. I was glad. But then they had budget cuts. And so I just put my name out, and I got several people interested in hiring me. So I took a job in Chicago, Illinois, as an athletic director at another YMCA down there. They flew me up and interviewed me and loved me and offered me literally on the spot. I'd never been in Chicago, but I was young, right out of college. So I took the job. And that led me to some very interesting moments in my career. So when I went there, I did the same thing. I started working with schools in areas that didn't have physical education programs. The very first school that hired me actually to work as a coach in their school was Lamont Township High School, a private school, beautiful facilities. I worked there as a coach for a couple of seasons. And then, as you do in our business, you can move around a lot. I wanted to get into a better program, bigger program. That was a small private school. And then I took a job, and this is a really good piece of history for myself. I took a job at a school called Progressive Charter School. It was a charter school started by these two young teachers. And what's interesting about the school is it's called Perspective Charter School. I'm sorry. What was interesting about that is I was the very first head basketball coach at this school. Anthony Davis graduated from that school. So I was the first coach to ever run a basketball program at that school. Anthony Davis graduated from that school. Now, I didn't coach him. He later on came through, but I was the first head coach there. So I coached at those two schools. I didn't much like Chicago because of the winters. There are 2 seasons in Chicago, construction and winter. And so I didn't like it, but had some great time, worked with some great schools, worked with some great programs. And then due to family, wanted to come where it was warmer, which led me to Florida. And when I got here, again, I went directly into working in the public schools. I worked some really tough schools in Miami-Dade. I took a job as an educational mobile unit director. What we did was take mobile units into these really impoverished areas, because we understand through academics that if kids can't read, they struggle. So we took them into these tough schools and taught the kids how to read, and took in famous people, Miss America, Miss Florida, a lot of politicians, a lot of sports figures would come on our mobile unit and read to kids in some of those tough areas. I did that for a number of years. And then one day, a buddy of mine who worked at Palmer Trinity, who knew me back in my college days, asked me would I come on at Palmer and coach with them, that he had the school didn't have a big history in basketball, but we could turn it around. He had some really good players that were young. And so I came up, looked at the school. They hired me as an assistant basketball coach. And I found myself every day making that 90-minute drive in traffic down there to coach, and it was the best time of my life. I enjoyed it. I mean, I literally had to get on the road at 2:15 to be there for 3:30, set up, practice. I loved it. I did that a couple of years, and then a position came available as a middle school athletic director. Interviewed me, and they hired me, and then a couple of years later, I would take on the role as the head basketball coach and assistant middle school athletic director, and then chaired the department, and then work up to the athletic director. So really, really nice course of work that gave me a lot of great experience.
Well, I'm certainly, familiar with a lot of your work at Palmer. I know, basketball wise, you had some Final Four teams. I think many years, um, you took a group of underachievers and got much more out of them than maybe another coach might have. Certainly, you put your stamp on the athletic program these past several years. Um, Now you're starting a new adventure at Palmer Trinity as the director of sports enrichment and diversity admissions. Tell us about that job and how you see that impacting what you can bring to Palmer Trinity.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. I'm at a point now in my career, and I think with your experience, you understand, we want to do what we love and what brings us great joy. And so this opportunity for me couldn't be more perfect. I worked for a school a number of years that respect what I've done. So they've allowed me to get involved in the position and basically create it. It's kind of a hybrid of off of an auxiliary director. So director of enrichment, I'm going to work with and develop programs that help our kids that might not make certain athletic teams, and also in the off season and the summers to develop sports camps and clinics and things that allow kids to learn great lessons through sports. The diversity component of it is now with these social issues that we're dealing with. Um, hang on. Now with the social issues that we're dealing with, you need a voice that can help. I'm sorry, Jake. I hear music in the background. I'm sorry. Great. So the diversity component again now with these social issues, the school realized that they needed a voice, someone in admissions to help uh, guide some diversity and just help those families, because again, these families are coming to a school with a different culture and an admissions process that's pretty rigorous. So just someone, for lack of a better word, to hold their hands to help them. So we're helping families and kids of color that may be through, could be race, could be social economics, anything that makes them different that they might need some attention. So I would help them with that process. Also in our area, maybe highlight those families or talk to families that might have never considered a prep school, let alone an Episcopal school, and just make them aware that we're here, what we offer, our services are, and to get them involved in that. The most important, or for me, the most rewarding part of what I'll be doing is mentoring coaches and athletes. Because I am an education-based believer in athletics. I think what we do now is we kind of prepare for what I call the 2%ers, the 1 or 2% of athletes that will go on to major universities and maybe get paid to play athletics. That's not a reality. 98% of student athletes will go on to be great professionals and get a good education and maybe become doctors, teachers, lawyers, coaches, whatever it may be. So this part allows me to mentor young people and young coaches, to do some public speaking, which I love, to get better at it, to work with organizations like the FIAAA, the National Athletic Directors Conference. I'm working with the Positive Coaching Alliance. I've signed up with them also to do some work. And I still continue to work with the Florida High School Athletic Association, Sectional Appeals Committee member, and then to be involved with the General Assembly. So that's a lot, but in a nutshell, it's all the things that I really love doing over a career.
Again, just what a great opportunity to develop a program and put your stamp on it. within the environment of a school that you've been at for now, about 20 years, right?
That is correct.
Okay. You and I talked a little bit earlier about COVID. Certainly, it's had an impact in Florida and across the nation. As we look to reopen nationally, we're seeing all sorts of different models. This state is going ahead full speed. This state is delaying. Even in Florida, we have a response. It's all over the board. What are some things that you did this past spring with your student athletes and coaches at Palmer Trinity, and what do you see your response as a school right now under the current Florida guidelines? How do you see Palmer Trinity reopening in the fall?
Well, one of the things that the head and the transition to the new athletic director has done, the schools in our area that are like us, the Ransoms, the Gullivers, they're going to all meet. So whatever decision that they make, all those same type schools will do the same thing. So they're going to open on the 27th, and everybody's going to do that under some contingency. So I have some Zoom meetings coming up, and I'm going to figure out what that is and how that plays on my new role. Again, my personal opinion is we should hold off. I don't think we have enough information. I certainly don't think there's too many variables to control. And I just don't know if it's safe. And then you're still wondering if you're going to get all of your student athletes and coaches out to practice sessions to begin. I just don't think it's going to work. Now, what I did was in the spring, moving into the summer, well, actually we're into the summer, into June, ran a couple of sessions under the new guidelines, and they went fairly well. So some of the things that we did was, the temperature checking, and we had a log check-in by I brought in a nurse, I brought in my athletic trainer, so they all handled the check-in. We practiced social distancing, we used gloves, a lot of hand sanitizing. We didn't use the locker rooms, but in the locker rooms, I put in some glass between lockers if someone had to go in. That's for the future. Masks, giving coaches portable microphones in their masks so they don't have to take it off to speak to athletes. We looked at, again, some face shields. We looked at sanitizing the whole athletes with the system, and we looked at cleaning off the shoes. We looked at cleaning off shoes and other things. So just a really good plethora of new ideals. There are ideals coming in every day about, how to be safer. But the bottom line is, as I read, as I talk on Zoom, as I go through the day-to-day of just living, we're so accustomed to doing things a certain way, we just forget. People forget sometimes to wear masks. People forget all the things that they touch, elevators, corridors, doorknobs. If you fall down, you might put your hand on the ground. Everybody's walked there, and you might not think that's a big issue. So little things like that. It's very hard to manage and too many moving parts. But again, if they give us the go-ahead and we have parents that are willing, we'll put those safety measures in place and try our best to be safe. But the fear is, you have one case that could shut your program down. And again, that's where we are today. We're backed up. If I believe we had masked and social distance properly and stayed in quarantine, maybe another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that maybe at this point we'd have different results. We might be able to be back to some kind of normalcy.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenging time, and I don't think any other state is like Florida in our variety of responses. This spring, in addition to COVID, we also saw hopefully an increased awareness regarding social issues. From your perspective, what are some things that we can do as leaders in athletics to do a better job of responding and being aware of the social issues that were at the forefront this past spring?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to just be conscious, number one, that we have a health crisis and we have social issues. And those two things are not politics. That's the very first thing. A lot of people are confusing the two, and it's not politics. The health issue is a health issue. It affects everybody globally. We have to try to fix this, find a vaccine, remedy it. The social issue is the same thing. That's why globally everybody's gotten involved. I never understood why people need racial information or racial profiling for basic necessities. Like if I'm going to apply for a job, I'm not sure why you need to know my race for me to apply for a job. So all these things we don't need to do. But I do know that sports is the best catalyst to bring about change, because people from different races and economics, faiths, will support a team, will support a city, will support a state, will support a country. So sports can help us, and it can help us have the conversation early on, because we can have athletes very young and teach them about diversity by different athletes accepting each other, spending time together. It's still the best way to teach life lessons. Things I still go through today, I've learned through athletics, having great mentors that guided me, sharing what we call the trenches with teammates from different backgrounds and different races. So that helped me learn. So the way for us to get better is first to understand that health issues and social issues are not politics. Politics is something very different, and when we um, mix the two, we get emotional, and that's what sports is. A lot of sports is very emotional. So when people are emotional, they're not rational. And what you want to do is have a plan that allows athletes to learn from each other and to grow. And, like my granddaddy always said, you want to treat people the way you want to be treated. That's easily said, but oftentimes seems very difficult to do.
You just mentioned mentors, and in our profession, we know how important it is to have mentors to develop leadership. Who've been some of your mentors? Growing up, you mentioned your grandfather, but who've been some of the mentors and leaders that you've had in your career that have got you to where you are today?
That's an easy one for me. There are three really distinct mentors that helped me in my life, and I still continue to grow. And unfortunately, all three of these mentors of mine have passed away. The very first one, his name was called him Coach Gilry, um, down in Louisiana. He was my football coach and mentor. He was the first guy that believed in me as a football player. And he walked up to me one day and told me I was going to play the position of quarterback. And again, I had no interest in it. And he said, "You're going to do it, and you're going to be good at it because you're a born leader." He saw something in me I didn't even see myself. His name is Murphy Gilry. He's inducted into the Louisiana High School Hall of Fame. He worked at the same school for over 30 years. And he was the first person that believed in me. The next person was a teacher. His name was Alvin Shaw. He taught, back in those days, they taught typing and accounting. Um, but he was one of the first teachers that told me I could do anything that I wanted to do. And so he got me involved in some programs. But he always told me, you're smart. You can do whatever you want to do. And then growing up where I grew up, you didn't hear that awful lot. So that really, really helped me with my confidence. And then the last person that was my mentor was Mr. James. He went to Leland University, had a deep voice. He'd say, "Mr. Robertson, you are going to be exciting." But his name was Mr. Philip James, a football player. And he just always talked to me about life. He helped me in college so much. I wasn't even sure about a major. And then he told me, "You need to learn how to manage people, money, and time. If you can do those things, son, you can do anything." And so when he talked to me about that, I immediately majored in accounting and management. And he's been true to this day. I can do anything that I want because I understand how to manage people, money, and time. So Mr. Philip James was my third mentor, and just really, really a good person.
Appreciate you sharing that. Well, I asked this question of all our guests, and I've known you now for 12 years, and I think I already know the answer, but What are some of your favorite parts about the job of being an athletic director, being involved in athletics? What gets you excited about coming to work each day?
Yeah, I think you could put a sign on my desk on front of my door that says "Students First." I love working with young people, and I really love the art of coaching. I'm not the kind of coach, I love to have talent. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the better the raw talent is, I think it's like clay, you can mold it. I love to have talent, but I also love the challenge of what my mentors did for me to make some child believe in itself, to find a skill or a talent that was hidden. I love the way we wear the same uniforms, share a meal, travel on the same bus, have those conversations about life. I love the whole art of coaching. I now know after 50 years that it is my calling. It is really what I want to do. So when I mentor with athletes and coaches, it's still a part of a team. I'm still coaching, um, and kind of molding. And I love to get to the end result, to have people believe in something and then get there, design it, um, kind of water it like a plant, watch it flourish and get there. I received some really heartwarming notes from our seniors this year that weren't able to finish sports. Uh, but two young men sent me a note, and then the gist of their note was, "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for believing in me, coach, and allowing me to have a great experience." They weren't great athletes, but they're good people. And I also got a call from a parent who said the same thing. Um, Her son, she said, "Thank you for believing in him. Thank you for working with him. Thank you for giving him the confidence. He may never know what you've done for him, but I want you to know that I know. He may never be able to tell you, but I know." And that's why I do what I do. And I really, truly love it.
No, I can attest to that. I saw it a number of times. Kid might only get in the game for 90 seconds, but you got the maximum of his ability in that 90-second period. Just it's great watching you coach with kids. Well, Ernest, we kind of come to the end of the podcast, and we always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. You're a master AD, and now you're getting ready to send a brand new athletic director out on their first position. But I'm only going to let you put 3 items in their toolbox. What's going to go in Ernest Robertson Jr.'s toolbox?
Um, for me, it's a no-brainer. There are going to be 3 things. Number one, I think you have to keep positive quotes. That's around your student and your health. You have to keep that in your life, so you can stay healthy, stay positive, have a clear mind. Every day when you walk in your office, you should have something that you look at, either your goal list or some positive statement that reminds you why you do what you do, because you're going to be challenged. So I would say have that in mind and make sure that's in your office every day. I would say have a great support staff. Make sure you have people around you that can carry out your vision, people around you that support you. Have great coaches that understand how to manage a team, how to help hire good assistant coaches. That will also make your job easy. And the third, and what I think is the most important thing I put in that toolbox, is make sure you have the full support of the leadership, of the head of school, of the leadership team. Make sure that what you do, your values, are aligned with the school. I see that a lot with ADs that I help mentor. Their values don't align. That's going to be critical. If the values don't align, I wouldn't take the job, because if you're in a school simply to win as an athletic director, and the values of the school are education based and to teach kids and teach lessons, I'm not saying you can't win and do both. It's going to be very difficult, very difficult. And if you come in with an education based platform and all the institution wants to do is win games and get high profile athletes, those values don't line up and you're going to struggle. People are going to think you're not know what you're doing. So people want to mimic what we do so close to the universities, the way they hire and fire coaches and athletic directors. It's not the same. So I would say thirdly, make sure you have the support of the leadership and the head of school or the principal, and make sure that their values, the institution values, the principal's values, lined up with your values that will make your job much easier, be much more rewarding, and most of all, less stressful on you.
Absolutely. Great, great advice. Well, Ernest, thanks so much for being on the program today. Really enjoyed the visit and want to wish you all the best with this new opportunity.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate you having me. Again, good luck to you. And you can call me anytime I can help with anything. I'm ready to do it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the next chance we get to present together at NIAAA. Well, listeners, thanks again for tuning in. Come back again next time for another edition of the Educational AD Podcast.